Hi everyone, welcome to this video on Pytest. Pytest is a popular testing framework for Python. It makes it easy to write tests and run them. In this video, we'll be going over basics of Pytest and how you can use it to write and run tests for your Python code. Before we begin, let's discuss why is it important to write tests. Writing tests is important because it helps ensure that your code is working correctly and will continue to work correctly even when you make changes to it. Think of test as a set of checks that you run on your code to make sure that it's doing what it's supposed to do. If you write tests, then every time you make changes to your code, you can simply run the test to make sure that everything is still working as expected. So let's begin. So for Pytest, what you need to do is you need to install Pytest on your system first. I have it already installed, but I will actually show you how you can do that. So it's simple, pip install Pytest. Yeah, as you can see, it is already installed, so nothing gets done here. Now let's move to our editor, VS Code. We'll create some dummy functions for the purpose of this video. Let's create a very simple function for addition. We'll start with very simple examples because it's just easy to explain concepts there. This function will just return the value of addition between A and B. And let's also write a slightly more complicated function, which I have named as get value. What it will do is it will return the value from a dictionary given a key. Right? So the key here is X, and we'll define a sample dictionary here. And let's say this dictionary will hold the colors of certain item, like milk is white, rose is red, sky is blue, grass is green. Right? And we'll return sample it and we'll return the value. And this is a function which will give you the value given a key, but we can also provide a default value in case that key does not exist. And the default value we are saying is none. Right? So let's say these are the two functions that you have in your code, and you want to test whether they are behaving or returning values as you would expect them. So for that, you will need to write tests. So for using Pytest, what you need to do is you need to write certain functions and creating a uh, separate Python file for this called test functions. Now this test functions will have your test written. So first what you need to do is import Pytest and then need to start writing your test code. So any test function for Pytest will start with the keyword test. So test underscore addition will be the function which will test the addition function that we have. Now before we can call the addition function, we'll have to import it. So let me do that. So from functions import addition, and let me also import dict values. And what we'll do is the test that we'll write is we will give certain values to addition and write what is expected. So assert addition 5 4 and it should return a 9. Right, let me write one more statement. So if I add 0 and 0, it should return a 0. Right? So let's see if this works, if the function behaves the way we would want it to behave. Right? For that, we'll go back to our terminal and we'll just write Pytest, and you can see that it is saying that one passed. So we had written one test and that test passed 100%. Right? What we'll now do is let me try adding a wrong value. So let's say 7 and we say it's 2, which is clearly not correct. Let's run Pytest again, and here you can see that there's a failure. The expected value that we had written was 2, but the actual value we got was 11, which is clearly the right answer for addition of 4 and 7. So yeah, this is how it will Pytest will tell you that there is some problem in the code that you have written, or in this case the test that you have written. Let's now write a test function for our other method that we have, which is dict value. So dict value, and let's put some values here. Assert value, and we'll pass blank here, and it will tell us that it is white. Let's try the other values. Sky should be blue, right? And we can also check some other values which we don't have in our dict, and let's see if that works. So what if a user passes empty string here? So it should return unknown because empty string is not in our dictionary. And let's say the user passes wall. A wall can have any colors, and that is not defined in our dict. So that will also be unknown. So this is the test cases that we have written. So let's test again. Right. So now to passed. Both the tests that we have written have passed in this case. Now this is simply how Pytest will work. Now there are additional things that you can do with Pytest. One is writing test fixtures. Test fixtures allow you to provide certain data to your test function. For example, if a test requires certain data, that can be written as part of a text fixture, and that text fixture will be called whenever you run a test. So for example, in this case, instead of manually writing 5 and 4, maybe these are generated through a function, and we would want to do that. So let me comment it and generate the data to test addition function through a test fixture. So what I will do is I will write a new function, which is, okay, let me call it addition data. This will return certain data for my addition function. Let me define an array, and this array will have various different values that I want to check. So 5, 4, 9, similar to what we have above, 0, 0, 0. So what I'm writing here is that if I give 5 and 4, the return should be 9. If I pass 0 and 0, it should be 0. And then there is a third one. Let me also write this. If I pass 7 and 0, it should return 7. And I will return data from this function. Now to make sure that this function is recognized as test fixture, you have to write this decorator pytest.fixture, and now you can use it in a test. So let me rewrite my test in this way. Here I will have to pass the function which is my test fixture. This will be called whenever this function will be called whenever test addition is called. This function will return me the data that I want to use for my test. So let me store the data into a variable called x, because that will allow me to be more precise when I write the rest of the code. And what I will now do is, because I will get this data, this is array, I will just loop through this data array and test for all these conditions. So I will write a loop for I in range of length of x, assert addition of x. So this is the ith index, so I will pick up first, second, third. This is I, and within this I will pick up the 0th element. I will pass first the 0th element and then the first element, and what I will expect in return is the second element. Right? So what this will allow you to do is, if the data for this test has to be generated through a more complicated process, you can provide that complicated process here, and that data you can use in your test. Now let's run this. And as you can see, the function is passing. Let's try something which will fail it. Yeah, you can see that it is failing. We are getting a value of 8. We expected 7. We should get 8. So there's something wrong in the data that we provided. Okay. So this is one way to provide data. The other way is to use parameters. So similar thing that we have done right now, we'll do it through parameterization. So what this means is, will be very clear if I just write the code for it. So let's say that we are again defining our test addition, and we would want certain data to be tested. So the data that we want to test is the two input parameters x and y, which need to be added, and the additive value is z. And let's also make sure that we are asserting this. Assert addition of x comma y is equal to z. Now, where does this function gets the value of x, y, and z? For that, we can provide another decorator, mark.parametrize, right? And here we specify the 3 values, the data that we want to test it on. We'll use the same thing that we had above, 549, 0, 0, 0, 7, 0, 7. Every time we run this test, it will try out all different combinations of input data that we have, and that will be used for the test. Now let's run this, and you can see now it is passing. Right? One final thing that I want to tell you is how to skip tests. Let's say that there is a third function that we define, but let me do it within this function itself. Right? So let's say this function takes a lot of time, and you don't want to run it all the time that you want to test, or probably you have an automated CI/CD and there are certain things which can't be run in that CI/CD environment. So in that case, you probably want to skip this in certain contexts, but you don't want to remove the test altogether, because in other situations you might want to run this test. And the way I want to demonstrate is that, let's say this test runs takes a lot of time to run. So what I will do is I will essentially add a delay timer here. So import time and time dot sleep, and let me put a value of 2 here. Right? So it will just show you that this is not a function which runs instantaneously. It just takes some time to run. In this case, I don't want to, for now, I don't want to run this particular test. So what I can do here is I can add a decorator, which is pytest.mark.skip. And now what you will see is that the number of tests which were earlier 4, and let me just clarify why do we see 4 here. The reason why we see 4 here is because there are 3 data inputs that we are testing here, so 1, 2 and 3, and then this was the 4th one. Now you can see out of these 4, 3 have passed and 1 is skipped, so this one skipped is this one. Okay. So this is overall how Pytest helps you write better code and test your functionality of the code that you've written. I hope this was helpful for you. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the comment section. Thank you for watching the video.